Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining the channel, but in this video we're taking a look at exotic machine gun damage and DPS, but unlike my usual DPS videos, we'll be comparing that across classes. So for example, DPS will be measured on hunters with all reloads completed using the dodge ability. Warlocks will have the exotic boots Transversive Steps and measuring the time it takes for them to reload by running around in a little circle. And Titans will have the exotic chest piece Actium War Rigs, so nothing that speeds up reloading but rather postpones it, or in the case of some weapons, removes all requirements to reload entirely. So as you can probably guess, the weapons tested are Xenophage, Heir Apparent and Thunderlord. Of course, with this video, no weapon mods have been used and there were no armor reload mods used for the Titan class either. The structure of the video will be a little different, talking about the method used for each class, a brief explanation of the numbers but not including DPS as that's been saved for the graph section. I'm also not going to talk about DPS for the weapons when used normally, as it's not the point of the video and that's already been covered on this channel. So let's quickly run over the numbers, talking about damage per round and total damage. First up, Xenophage. This does 15,322 damage per round against Greg and can hold a total of 28 rounds in its reserves with no armor mods boosting this. Therefore, total damage comes in at 429,016. Heir Apparent next, and this does 1,331 damage per round and holds a total of 500 with nothing to boost this. Therefore, total damage comes in at 665,500, comfortably beating Xenophage for total damage output. And finally, Thunderlord. This can hold a total of 220 rounds with no mods to increase that and does 1,665 damage against Greg. Now, due to the exotic perks on this gun, occasionally lightning does strike down and do additional damage. I've found it appears to be roughly every 10 rounds, although I haven't timed every single one. Now each strike does 3,453 damage, therefore total damage is 437,517. Ever so slightly beating Xenophage. There's also a slight change to this for Titans, which I'll discuss in a moment. Now, let's take a quick look at the reload methods for each class. But of course, with the Titan, there isn't actually any change, but rather, with the Actium War Rig exotic chest piece equipped, you can fire for much longer before reloading. In the case of Xenophage and Heir Apparent, you don't need to reload at all before emptying every round. With Thunderlord equipped on the Titan as well, you need to reload 3 times to fire every round, but the last magazine, when I was testing, there was only 7 rounds, so I've not included them as it would tank the final DPS number. This has also been taken into consideration for total damage, of which with those 7 rounds missing, that drops to 354,645. Remember, this is only for the Titan though. For the Warlock reload, you need the exotic boots Transversive Steps, and when the magazine reaches 0, run around in a little circle. After doing this for almost exactly 1.5 seconds, the weapon will reload and you can continue to fire. Of course, you need to keep an eye on the magazine number and fire as fast as possible once the magazine has reloaded. If you're facing in the wrong direction and need to turn around to face the target again, etc., this can obviously add a short delay. Numbers for this method assume you start firing immediately after the reload. And finally, hunters. So the dodge ability actually reloads much faster than Transversive Steps, but due to the animation carrying on after that, you can't fire it again until, believe it or not, nearest damn it 1.5 seconds, which I'm going to demonstrate on screen now for both classes with Top Tree Night Stalker subclass on the hunter. So not exactly the same, but only a couple of frames off, the equivalent of around 0.03 seconds. So because of this, DPS for both the Warlock and Hunter will be assumed to be the same. The benefit of the Hunter though is that you can hold down the fire button towards the end of the dodge animation and automatically start firing again as soon as it ends. Whereas with the Warlock, as I've also discussed, you need to keep an eye on the magazine number to see when it's reloaded, and also try to make sure you're facing in the correct direction. Not to mention, reaction time should be added to this, unless you time it perfectly, and I can't account for that as everyone's reaction time will be different. So they may have the same DPS number, or at least very similar, therefore on the graph there'll be a single line representing these two classes, but it's much easier to achieve as a hunter. So let's take a look at these on the graph, starting with Thunderlord on a hunter or warlock. Now, you may notice that as the line climbs and you're doing damage, it looks to be curved. That's because as you fire Thunderlord, it ramps up its speed and starts to fire faster with, from what I can tell, 3 levels of RPM speed, then being the original, then it ramps up to stage 1 after around 2.15 seconds, and then after around 2.3 seconds it ramps up to stage 2, and the speeds go from, bear in mind these are an estimate, 450 RPM to 600 RPM and finally 720 RPM. DPS for this is 16,678. After that it's Thunderlord on a Titan. You can see the same subtle curve at the start of a magazine, but then it straightens up and maintains a consistent damage output. This is obviously because the Titan can fire for longer due to Actium War Rigs, and it sits at that higher RPM speed for longer. You may notice it does slightly less total damage than Thunderlord on either of the other 2 classes, and that's just because I haven't included the last 7 rounds, for reasons already discussed. DPS for this is 18,047. Next up now is Heir Apparent on a Warlock and Hunter, and you can also probably see where the results for all of this are going. So, with the flat section at the start being the spin up time, Heir Apparent can then maintain damage for quite a long period of time for each magazine. It's actually around 13.3 seconds. The flat section during reload would usually be a lot shorter, but of course that spin up time effectively extends the reload duration. Still, massive amounts of damage that can be maintained for over 40 seconds when using it as a Warlock or Hunter mind, with DPS coming in at 16,080. Now, taking a look when it's on a Titan, and the lines naturally mirror each other up until you normally need to reload on one of the other classes, but of course with the Titan, it just keeps on going, without a single reload being required and no need to wait for the weapon to spin up again. DPS here comes in at 19,227. And finally, Xenophage, one of the most popular choices for DPS due mainly to its ease of use. On a Hunter and Warlock when dodging or using Transversive Steps, respectively, DPS is 25,089, which is actually rather good. But on a Titan, you never need to reload, so DPS for that is 30,644. When choosing a weapon for boss damage and also taking into consideration how accessible the best DPS figure for that weapon is, not much beats Xenophage. Now, of course, that's just DPS. If you're not short on time when dealing damage, Heir Apparent in a lot of circumstances could be better, dealing 55% more total damage than Xenophage. Remember though, Heir Apparent requires precision hits to achieve this, and at 900 RPM, it's quite likely you'll miss a few. So, coming onto the graph now, for Hunters and Warlocks only, is Heir Apparent with only 80% of the rounds fired inflicting precision damage, with the other 20% doing body shot damage. DPS for this is 15,532, with total damage being 642,800, and of course the time remains the same. As for Thunderlord, yeah, it does okay for the first 8 to 10 seconds, but starts to fall behind after the first reload, regardless of class, but with the lightning rounds and rain havoc perks, it's extremely good for ad clearing. Very predictable results overall, really, with Xenophage being the clear winner for DPS and Heir Apparent for total damage output. Personally though, from a fun factor point of view, Heir Apparent is a clear winner. What an absolutely awesome weapon, and I've said it before, but bravo Bungie. Not a video I initially planned to make, but I was interested, so I thought I'd do it anyway. With a Horde with rocket launchers and grenade launchers is coming next, unless I get Supremacy in the meantime, as that does take priority. I'm also going to revisit Berenger's memory, as a couple of people in the comments section have asked for it, but with different perks. But until then, that is all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, as it helps me out a lot. Any feedback, let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.